had become valueless, the rumour of it having been blown abroad to the four winds. It was immediate departure that was essential to my success, departure from Bagamoyo, after which it might be possible for me to control my own future in a great measure. These troubles were the greatest that I could at this time imagine. I have already stated that I had $1,750 worth of pagazis cloths, or 3,500 doti, stored in my tent, and above what my bales contained. Calculating 140 pagazis at 25 doti each, I supposed I had enough; yet, though I had been trying to teach the young Hindoo that the Musungu was not a fool, nor blind to his pilfering tricks, though the 3,500 doti were all spent, though I had only obtained 130 pagazis at 25 doti each, which in the aggregate amounted to 3,200 doti. Sir Haji Pallow's bill was 1,400 cash extra. His plea was that he had furnished Uyela cloths for Muhungu, 240 doti, each in value to 960 of my doti; that the money was spent in fairy pice, in presents to chiefs of caravans of tents, guns, red broadcloth, in presents to the people on the Mrima coast, to induce them to hunt up pagazis. Upon this exhibition of most ruthless cheating I waxed indignant, and declared to him that if he would not run over his bill, and correct it, he should go without a pice. But before the bill could be put into proper shape, my words, threats, and promises falling heedlessly on a stony brain, a man, Kanji by name, from the store of Tayara Topan of Zanzibar, had to come over, when the bill was finally reduced to 738. Without any disrespect to Tayara Topan, I am unable to decide which is the most accomplished rascal, Kanji or young Sir Haji Pallo. In the words of a white man who knows them both, "there is not the splitting of a straw between them." Kanji is deep and sly, Sir Haji Pallo is bold and incorrigible. But peace be to them both. May their shaven heads never be covered with the troublous crown I wore at Bagamoyo. My dear friendly reader, do not think if I speak out my mind in this or in any other chapter upon matters seemingly trivial and unimportant, that seeming such they should be left unmentioned. Every tittle related is a fact, and to know facts is to receive knowledge. How could I ever recite my experience to you if I did not enter upon these miserable details, which sorely distract the stranger upon his first arrival? Had I been a Government official, I had but wagged my finger, and my quota of pagazis had been furnished me within a week. But as an individual arriving without the graces of official recognition, armed with no Government influence, I had to be patient, bide my time, and chew the cud of irritation quietly. But the bread I ate was not all sour, as this was. The white men, Farquhar and Shaw, were kept steadily at work upon waterproof tents of hemp canvas, for I perceived, by the premonitory showers of rain that marked the approach of the Masika, that an ordinary tent of light cloth would subject myself to damp, my goods to mildew; and while there was time to rectify all errors that had crept into my plans through ignorance or over haste, I thought it was not wise to permit things to rectify themselves. Now that I have returned uninjured in health, though I have suffered the attacks of 23 fevers within the short space of 13 months, I must confess I owe my life, first to the mercy of God, secondly to the enthusiasm for my work, which animated me from the beginning to the end, thirdly, to have never ruined my constitution by indulgence in vice and intemperance, fourthly, to the energy of my nature, fifthly, to a native hopefulness which never died, and sixthly, to having furnished myself with a capacious water and damp proof canvas house. And here, if my experience may be of value, I would suggest that travellers, instead of submitting their better judgment to the caprices of a tent maker, who will endeavour to pass off a handsomely made fabric of his own, which is unsuited to all climes, to use his own judgment, and get the best and strongest that money will buy. In the end it will prove the cheapest, and perhaps be the means of saving his life. On one point I failed, and lest new and young travellers fall into the same error which marred much of my enjoyment, this paragraph is written. One must be extremely careful in his choice of weapons, whether for sport or defence. A traveller should have at least 3 different kinds of guns. One should be a fowling piece. The second should be a double-barreled rifle, No. 10 or 12. The third should be a magazine rifle, for defence. For the fowling piece I would suggest No. 12 bore, with barrels at least 4 feet in length. For the rifle, for larger game, I would point out, with due deference to old sportsmen of course, that the best guns for African game are the English Lancaster and Riley rifles; and for a fighting weapon, I maintain that the best yet invented is the American Winchester repeating rifle, or the 16 shooter, as it is called, supplied with a London Alais ammunition. If I suggest as a fighting weapon the American Winchester, I do not mean that the traveller need take it for the purpose of offence, but as the best means of efficient defence, to save his own life against African banditti, when attacked, a thing likely to happen any time. I met a young man soon after returning from the interior, who declared his conviction that the express rifle was the most perfect weapon ever invented to destroy African game. Very possibly the young man may be right, and that the express rifle is all he declares it to be, but he had never practised with it against African game, and as I had never tried it, I could not combat his assertion, but I could relate my experience with weapons, having all the penetrating powers of the express, and could inform him that though the bullets penetrated through the animals, they almost always failed to bring down the game at the first fire. On the other hand, I could inform him that during the time I travelled with Dr. Livingstone, the Doctor lent me his heavy Riley rifle, with which I seldom failed to bring an animal or two home to the camp, and that I found the Fraser shell answer all purposes for which it was intended. The feats related by Captain Speke and Sir Samuel Baker are no longer matters of wonderment to the young sportsman, when he has a Lancaster or a Raleigh in his hand. After a very few trials he can imitate them, if not excel their leads, provided he has a steady hand, and it is toward this end that this paragraph is written. African game require bone crushers, for any ordinary carbine possesses sufficient penetrating qualities, yet has not the disabling qualities which a gun must possess to be useful in the hands of an African explorer. I had not been long at Bagamoyo before I went over to Massawady's camp, to visit the Livingstone caravan, which the British Consul despatched on the 1st day of November, 1870, to the relief of Livingstone. The number of packages was 35, which required as many men to convey them to Unyanyembe. The men chosen to escort this caravan were composed of Johannes and Wahiyo, 7 in number. Out of the 7, 4 were slaves. They lived in clover here, thoughtless of the errand they had been sent upon, and careless of the consequences. What these men were doing at Bagamoyo all this time I never could conceive, except indulging their own vicious propensities. It would be nonsense to say that there were no pagazis, because I know there were at least 15 caravans which had started for the interior since the Ramadan, December 15th, 1870. Yet Livingstone's caravan had arrived at this little town of Bagamoyo November 2nd, and here it had been lying until the 10th of February. In all, 100 days, for lack of the limited number of 35 pagazis, a number that might be procured within 2 days through consular influence. Bagamoyo has a most enjoyable climate. It is far preferable in every sense to that of Zanzibar. we were able to sleep in the open air, and rose refreshed and healthy each morning, to enjoy our matutinal bath.